Hey everybody, Dan and Leslie back with another video about moving to Orlando.
Today we are revisiting the biggest mistakes people make when moving to Disney World.
A little over 2 years ago, we packed up one giant U-Haul, 26-foot U-Haul to move our family of four from Oklahoma, 18 and a half hours, more than that in a U-Haul, down to Orlando, really to be close to Disney World, and it was a wonderful decision. But we came back from that first move, because we had two moves. We came back from that first move to Oklahoma to finish packing up everything, and we had spent a week down here, and so we made a video called the 12 biggest mistakes that people make when they move to Orlando. So we are revisiting those. While they all still hold true after living here for a couple of years, there are four in particular. We want to make sure that we talk a little bit more in detail about them. Hi, sister.
Before we get into that, if you're looking to plan your next magical vacation, please reach out to us over at Fantastical Vacations. We would love to help. We plan Disney destinations, Universal Cruise Lines, and all-inclusive resorts.
So mistake number one that we want to make sure that we emphasize a lot here is location. Location. Choosing the wrong location when you move to Orlando. It's probably true for everywhere in the United States, everywhere in the world, but specifically here in Orlando, there are quite a few reasons why you want to make sure that you choose the right location, specific to, especially if you're coming down for Disney or whatever.
Just to be clear, we think that we chose the perfect location. We are very, very happy. So we don't think that this is a mistake that we made, but we have seen other people make this mistake where they maybe move to an area and they don't really think through how often they're gonna be at the parks. And so they're so far from the parks that it makes getting there a little bit more inconvenient. Or maybe they move here and they move very close to the parks, but they don't consider the fact that their workplace is 45 minutes to an hour drive away. And so then they're doing that trek every single day. So kind of taking into consideration where you are gonna spend your most of your time is important.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest rule when you are looking at not making this mistake is where are you going to spend the majority of your time and making sure that you live close to that, because you just won't go to where you want to spend the majority of your time. If you have to go to work, you're going to go to work because you have to pay your bills, right? But if you want to be in Disney World or in Universal or in one of these other places, whatever the reason is that you're moving outside of work, whether it's to be close to family or whatever, live there. I really think this becomes a point of contention when people move down to Orlando, because living close to the most popular things is expensive. If you want to live right next to the theme parks, it is way more expensive than if you want to live 45 minutes away, which honestly on a map does not look that far away. Which brings me to the second rule here, and for us, a lot of people live south and east of I-4, but for us, this was a huge no-no. And we are so glad that we live west, like northwest of I-4. So I-4 is just an awful road. I mean, it is constantly under construction. The traffic on this thing, even at like midday on a weekday, not in the busy season, it is still really bad. Coming from the airport back to our house is really the only time that we get on I-4, and it is a nightmare. We hate it. So if you live on the northwest side of I-4, if you're wanting to go to Disney World, Universal, get, whatever it is, groceries, schools, churches, work, whatever, if that's all on one side, then you won't have to get on I-4 as much, unless you're working like kind of a far way away from where you live.
Yeah, our 17-year-old actually accidentally ended up on I-4 the other day, and he came home and he was like, that was terrifying.
That's why we said don't get on it.
Yeah. Another thing to take into consideration whenever you're deciding on location is if you do have kids that are in school, picking an area that has a good school system. So that was kind of another piece that went into where we decided that we wanted to live.
Specifically, our recommendation for what we like, and again, knowing that we moved down here really to be close to Disney and Universal and to be in the parks a lot, is there are three areas areas, Windermere, Horizon West, and Winter Garden. All three of those north and west of I-4, and they are all really, really good as far as community, schools, all of that. Like, we feel very comfortable here. We feel safe here. I mean, you're gonna have crime in every area of the world, but we do feel safe here, and we do love where we live.
Yes. Another thing to think about, and it's been very hard to get used to, even after 2 years of living here, is that it takes forever to drive places. I mean, you map it and it's like, this is 4.6 miles away and it's gonna take you 25 minutes to get there. And you're like, wait, what? Because there are so many things to drive around. So you've got theme park property, you've got lakes, you've got things that you can't just drive through. So you're 4.8 miles or whatever weaves you through all of these different things.
Windermere literally means among the lakes. And so, I mean, you drive, like, just for us to get to Universal, we don't have to get on I-4, but you do have to weave in and out of all these lakes. And it's beautiful, and I'm sure everyone loves living on the lakes, but it does take longer to get there. That's why we are so high on picking the right location.
Mistake number 2 is to check all of the costs and make sure that your budget supports them, because there are some things that were surprising that we had to pay for here that we didn't really ever have to pay for whenever we were living in Oklahoma.
The first one is insurance, and this one is a little more obvious. So everyone checks home costs, right? The cost of living, whether that's renting or buying, we'll get to that in a minute. But not everyone checks all of the different types of insurance that you're gonna need. So we had to get our own health insurance. We had to get, obviously, automotive insurance and property insurance. And so the cost of insurance in general for us went up, especially adding a kid to the mix. But just moving down here, before Aiden ever got auto insurance, ours went up about 50% moving from Oklahoma. Now, I'm sure there's some areas of the country where it's going to be cheaper or equivalent, but coming from the center of the country, you do not have Maseratis and Lamborghinis literally driving down the road.
Or at least not as many of them.
I mean, there are Bentleys that this is a very affluent area. We don't live in the affluent area, but we live in Windermere, and there are multi-million dollar houses with all these expensive cars, and people drive a little bit crazy down here. And so automotive insurance is definitely higher. Also, property insurance is much higher. Again, from us coming from Oklahoma, our property insurance is almost double. It's definitely more than 50% higher. Of course, we have hurricanes coming through here. We do not get the brunt of the hurricanes living in the center of the state, but there are still hurricanes. But coming from Tornado Alley, I did my research beforehand coming down, so we didn't make this mistake. However, just make sure you understand what it will cost to insure whatever if you are buying a home.
The next thing is taxes. So taxes are very different. And we get a couple of perks here, right? That we don't have state income tax, which is really nice. And also our sales tax is about 2% less than it was in Oklahoma. So that is also a nice perk. However, our property tax is higher. So
it's actually cheaper for us on taxes. But just make sure that you understand. So if you're coming from a state that doesn't have state income tax, or you're moving down here to retire and not work at all, if your property taxes are higher, you're probably gonna end up paying more money. Another thing to consider, something that we didn't consider coming down here, are just random costs that occur in Florida specifically. So like, one is HOA costs. So we lived 2 places in Oklahoma. One, we didn't have an HOA at all. One, we did have an HOA, but it was just very hands-off and very minute. It was basically to like pay for the upkeep on the landscaping on the entry to the neighborhood. This was kind of a shock coming down here. HOAs are very, very prevalent down here. Almost all neighborhoods have them, and a lot of them cost a lot of money, but they do provide a lot of things like landscaping, mowing. Some of them provide like some of utilities or internet or that kind of thing. Ours doesn't do that. So ours is just a little bit over $50 a month, which I think is very reasonable.
Yeah.
But they do require a lot of you. So like, we got a letter in the mail last summer. We were gone for a couple of weeks and we had some weeds pop up in our paver driveway. And so we had to get that taken care of immediately, which brings us to power washing.
Yeah, so it's a requirement that everybody cleans their own sidewalk and driveway directly in front of their house. And it has to be done pretty much like twice a year, at least once a year, but often twice a year because of the weather that we get here and the kind of humidity and everything. The sidewalks get kind of dingy and they just need sprucing up.
And then the last thing is basically landscaping. The HO is very specific on how much you have to keep up with landscaping. Again, some neighborhoods are a little bit more strenuous or stringent than others. But for instance, we have a pretty big oak tree in our front yard and we have to keep it limbed up, which I end up doing myself, but that is an added expense. I bought a saw specifically to cut these limbs, or you're paying somebody to come out and do it for you.
Yeah, but really the biggest thing that people overlook is, why are you coming here? And if it's for the theme parks, it's gonna be expensive.
Dining reviews. We go to a Disney restaurant every single week, table service restaurant, at least right now while we're doing the table service dining reviews. We're doing them for business, but we also pay for it out of our own pocket. And so that adds up pretty quick. So yes, we are having a nice experience, and it's one reason that we moved down here, to be immersed in Disney, Universal, all of that stuff. But it is definitely more expensive than eating out where we came from, and we are eating out more because we want to be in the magic.
And what's ironic is that you start getting used to paying more for things, and you go places and you see souvenirs and you're like, you start becoming numb to the amount that it actually costs, and you're like, oh yeah, I need a pair of socks for $20 or whatever. It's a little crazy. Also, taking into consideration if you're gonna get annual passes, so that might be an added expense for you whenever you're living here. And then deciding, are you gonna get annual passes for Disney and Universal, or just Disney or Universal? I mean, it all starts adding up. And then finally, what about those hard ticket events?
Yeah, I mean, living here is definitely, it definitely makes it easier for you to be able to do all of the stuff that you wanted to do when you could only come 1 week a year or 1 week every couple of years. So you can do every Run Disney event if you want to. You can do not only Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, but Mickey's Not So Scary Jollywood Nights, all of these things that cost a lot of money.
Halloween Horror Nights.
Halloween Horror Nights, one of our favorites. It is pretty expensive to do all that stuff, and it's pretty tempting to want to do it too because you moved down here to be close to all of the magic. All right, next on the list, the third biggest mistake that we see people move is rushing into a decision to buy a home versus rent, especially now with interest rates being as high as they are and the cost of property being as high as it is currently. It may not make sense for you to jump into purchasing a house. So let's talk about a couple of things, pros versus cons on renting versus buying. Number one is that if you rent, you do not have to come up with a giant sum of money for a down payment.
Another thing to think about whenever you're renting is that you don't necessarily have to decide on the location that you're going to stay forever or for years or whatever to make it make sense to purchase, which is really nice. For instance, we have friends that have older kids that are almost out of high school, and the house that they are renting, it may not be necessarily the location where they want to be whenever their kids move out of the house, and it may not be the size of house that they want whenever the kids move out. So they decided to rent so that they would have that flexibility here in a couple of years.
We got really lucky, to be honest with you. We did not know the area super well, but we lucked out and we found the perfect location for us, and it ended up being the perfect location for us. I'm not sure I would recommend that to everybody else moving down here. So if you don't know the area, it is probably better to rent, learn the area, and then buy something if you want to buy something later on when you know exactly where you want to be. Because if you jump into buying, you are not only paying those higher property costs now, because honestly, I'm not sure that property costs will go down anytime soon in Central Florida. It doesn't look like that's happening, but you're locking in paying those realtor fees from when you first buy. It is not an easy thing to just get out of your house, sell it, and move, because you're going to lose money in some of those upfront costs. Another thing to consider is upkeep and maintenance for the home. So it is true, like we redid our pool this year. That was a $15,000 expense. When we moved in, we replaced a water heater, we replaced an air conditioning unit. Those are things that are included in the rent. And yes, I mean, the the owner that you are renting from is not losing money, so they are including that in whatever the rent is, but it is amortized over a longer period of time, and you're not necessarily paying for the entire thing up front, and it is not a surprise, like your rent is what it is for however long your lease is, and you don't have to come up with thousands of dollars to replace a water heater if it breaks.
So on the flip side of that, the case for buying is that your payment will never increase, right? So if you rent, every time your lease is up, things are reevaluated, so your rent could actually increase. Whereas if you purchase, that's gonna be set.
Another thing to consider is that you can write off your mortgage interest if you itemize your taxes. If you take the standard deduction, then you don't get that tax break anyway, so that's not a benefit of buying.
Also, you build equity, which is really nice, and you're in control. So if you want to remodel your kitchen, go for it. If you want to put a pool in the backyard, the choice is yours.
The last mistake we want to highlight today is that thinking that your life will be like it was on vacation when you come down here. So many people come here, they go to Disney World year after year, and they're like, I want to live that life. Let me tell you, firsthand experience, life does go on. You still have to go to the grocery store. Your kids still have to go to school. You still have to earn money somehow, whether that's going to a job or working from home. It is not going to be just being immersed in the bubble of Disney World 24/7 for an entire week, and once you move down here, expanding that to an entire year.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement kind of fades, but it transitions into something different, right? It's still magical, it's still amazing. We still love going to the parks, but we find that whenever we go, instead of being in this like magical lure of vacation, you kind of get irritated a little bit easier with things. You might see the negatives a little bit more often because it's become part of your day-to-day life, as opposed to it just being this once a year, twice a year, whatever trip that you end up coming down here for.
That isn't to say that it isn't wonderful.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Love living here. We love being able to pop into a park for a few hours, but it's just not like vacation. So just don't think it is going to be 100% like vacation. We get asked a lot, does the magic fade, right? And yeah, it kind of does. It doesn't go away, it changes, right? So just like you were saying, like it's not the same as it was. There's no anticipation anymore because you live here. You can go anytime you want. So it's not like you're counting down to coming to Disney World when you live right next door.
And don't forget that lots of people come here to visit, which has its pros and cons, right? So, I mean, we definitely get to see people a lot because they're down here, and it's so amazing to get to just like catch up and see people all the time. However, whenever we can't make it work for every single person that comes, we feel bad. It's hard to make it work for every single person because we still have work, we still have kids' school, we have to grocery shop, we still have normal life stuff that's happening, and so we can't, see every single person that comes to town.
So there you have it. Those are the 4 biggest mistakes that we have seen time and time again for people not considering whenever they are moving to come to Orlando and be next to Disney World. We have loved the entire past 2 years, but we also did consider all of these when coming down. We missed a few things in there. Hopefully some of this will give you some ideas if you're considering a move to Disney in the future.
Well, if you're liking these videos, please hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss the next one.
And we will see you on the next video.